Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's very special Hard Talk edition. I'm delighted to be joined today by Shankar Arumugavelu, who is the Global CIO at Verizon. And today we're going to be talking about the role of the CIO in this decade, a role that arguably is becoming more and more important to the future of our industry, and one that's certainly going through a dramatic amount of change. Shankar, welcome to Hard Talk.
Nick, glad to be here with you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody watching this Hot Talk session as well. Glad to be with you, Nick.
Thanks, Shankar. Now, we obviously have worked together for some time. You're part of also the TM Forum board, and I know we've been talking about this topic on and off over a number of years, so it's great to have today's session where we can really explore this. And the topic of the future of the CIO, I think it's fair to say, has been under debate for probably the last 10 or 15 years. There always seems to be a conversation around where's this role going. But it feels like at the moment there is a changing shift of what's important in terms of the way that we develop technology, the way that we approach technology, and perhaps are going back to roots in our industry in terms of the role of tech-led innovation and so on. But I think it'd be great to hear from you to start with, Shankar, about what's happened in the last few months, because this has been for all of us as leaders something you don't get a training course for. There's no chapter of business school on how to lead through a pandemic. So it'd be great to start by asking you, what's it been like for you learning to adapt with your team to work remotely, and what have been the impacts on how you lead a team through these challenging times?
Thanks for the question, Nick. And absolutely, like you mentioned, this has been certainly unprecedented times, right? So we never had a playbook to navigate through something like this. I know, being in the technology, being in IT, we're all used to developing high availability disaster recovery plans, et cetera. But these plans are more for localized conditions. But nobody anticipated a global pandemic like what we've been going through. And we literally had to write the playbook on the fly when it comes to how we had to navigate through this crisis. So massive effort for us in Verizon. The first phase of reacting to this crisis was all about how we adapt to adversity. And that entailed essentially pivoting over 115,000 of our workforce. In total, we have about 135,000 employees. So we had to pivot 115,000 to work from home. And as you can imagine, that's no small feat when you have a mixed group of personas that we have inside of our business. So we have frontline employees, and vast majority of our frontline employees have had no experience working from home before, because they had to be on site to perform their duties. And when it came to our knowledge workers and staff personnel, they did have this capability to work from home. So it wasn't much of a shift for them. But when it came to our frontline employees is really where heavy lifting was needed. So whether it be our folks in our retail stores, at the peak of the pandemic, we had about 70% of our stores closed. So we had to essentially have over 20,000 of our retail colleagues reskilled, if you will, and have them deployed in other parts of the business, whether it be in call centers, telesales, chat, et cetera, because they didn't have a store to go to perform their jobs. And the same thing when you talk about call center agents, all along we had about 20%, I would say, of our agents who were equipped to work from home. We call them home-based agents. But literally over a weekend, we had to virtually move 100% of our agents to work from home and take customer calls. So that was a big feat. And the third group I would talk about is our field technicians who had to go to customers' homes to troubleshoot, install services, et cetera. And they were home garaged as well. So they were essentially dispatched out of their homes, and we had to equip them with tools so they can do their jobs without necessarily stepping foot into customers' home as well. So there was quite a lot of innovation that we had done in this process as well. But I want to give a big shout out to our technology teams to really, when we talk about resiliency plans, business resiliency plans, et cetera. At the end of the day, what really made it work for us is that adaptability and that human resilience, and how our teams went above and beyond to figure out solutions for seemingly insurmountable problems. And that's how we've been able to pivot that. So that was phase one. And phase two, we've been focused on really figuring out like how we reimagine everything, right? So rethink everything that we're doing. How can we challenge the status quo? And phase three, which is what we're spending time now on, how do we gradually return to office? So that's how we've been navigating through this crisis so far. Quite a lot of lessons through this as well. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk more as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And
hey, everybody. It looks like we're having a technical glitch with Nick. I know they're having storms in London, so it seems like we've lost some connection with Nick. But Shankar, just to pick up, sure. I thought we could start with an audience question that's come in that sure. I thought we could kick off. The first one is, in the new normal, it chimes in nicely with what you were just talking about. In the new normal, some people are predicting it could be work from anywhere. In such a scenario, security and privacy becomes really important. How are you planning to address that?
Oh, absolutely. This is paramount, right? So when we talk about everybody working from home, for that matter, working from anywhere, really what has happened now is the attack surface has expanded too. And this is where the approach that we have taken from a cybersecurity standpoint has always been a zero trust security model, right? So we don't really look at or essentially trust just the fact that if we have devices that is within our perimeter, that's good. And if it's outside, that's the one that we'll have to protect from infiltrating, et cetera. So instead, what we adopt is what we call the zero trust model. Pretty much every device, has to go through our security protocols. Every single user had to be authenticated, irrespective of whether they are inside our perimeter or outside our perimeter. So, and to the point as well, one of the things that we've been doing when it comes to security is cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, right? It's just not the function of the CIO organization or the CISO organization. Everybody has a role in this. So we've started, continuous refreshers when it comes to cyber awareness programs, right. Letting people know to, think before you click anything, because believe it or not, email still is the #1 vector for these right. Issues, right? When right. it comes to malware, credential thefts, etc. So looking at having the right email defense mechanisms in place, endpoint protections as well. So in case if somebody were to click that, how do you make sure you're protecting your device from being infected by any malware, etc. And the other thing we do is we call defense in depth, right? Essentially building resiliency in our defense mechanism. So if one fails, what do you have behind that to protect? And what do you have even behind that to add another level of protection? So those kind of precautions and protection measures is really what we take. And clearly, like cybersecurity is a top priority. In fact, Verizon released a data breach investigation report. So this is something that we do on a regular basis to our enterprise customers to really figure out what they can do to protect their environment. So this is a big deal.
So aside from protecting your employees, let's talk about the protecting your back-end IT systems. Did you have to change anything that you were doing with your vendors that you work with security-wise?
So yeah, I think that's a good question. So we've all along had a robust supplier risk management program as well, right? So because one of the things that we'll also have to watch out for is what kind of infiltration can happen when it comes through our third-party suppliers network, right? So you want to make sure that the right kind of security protocols, whether it's site-to-site VPN mechanisms, et cetera, to make sure that the bad actors don't find an avenue to come through our suppliers network and then infiltrate into our network. So all along, we have had a very robust supplier risk management program. If anything, as we got into this crisis as well, we had doubled down on that with periodic assessments to make sure all the right security measures have been implemented with our partners as well.
Mm-hmm. So kind of following along with this, let's talk about COVID a bit more. We got a question that's coming in from the chat board from Mark. Mark, thanks for your question. Mark is asking how difficult it was to move your call center staff to working from home. That's, usually they're used to working in a big call center. So, and to take their, not only them physically, but also the back end systems of getting all those people to work from home. How did that work?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Liz, even before the pandemic, around 20% of our call center agents were already working from home. So because we have been working on this approach for a while now to see, make sure that we can get better at this. And if anything, what we had to do during this pandemic is shift that from 20% to 100%. So now how we were able to get that is a combination of technologies that we had to use, right? Some we had equipped them, we have a home-based agent kit, which has an access point, with the desktop that our reps have to use, that has access back into all our applications that runs in either the public cloud or our private data centers. And what has been a big help here is we had virtualized our call center desktops several years ago. And that was key for us to be able to pivot on a drop of a dime, to be able to get them up and running quick with all the access, so there was no issues when it came to accessing critical systems to serve customer calls, et cetera. In fact, even once we had equipped them in this model, from a call volume standpoint, we still saw, I think about 95% or so of the call volume that used to come pre-COVID, but, our reps were, from a productivity and efficiency standpoint, fully equipped to handle those calls and maintain the service levels to deliver the right experience for our customers.
Okay, so it sounds like you've been prepared, which is obviously something every company should be doing at this time. Let's talk a little bit about a digital transformation. We had a question come in from the audience, and I think this works nicely with what we were just talking about. Has the pandemic slowed or accelerated your digital transformation, or perhaps refocused them in different domains? So let's talk about that for a little bit.
This is a great question. Absolute. What I would say is, if anything, the pandemic has accelerated our digital transformation, right? So what we have seen happen during this time as well is programs in our digital transformation agenda that were in our backlog. If anything, we accelerated all of them. Let me give you a couple of examples to illustrate that point, right? So if you look at our retail stores, like I mentioned, at the peak of the pandemic, we had 70% of our stores closed. 30% were open. So we had to very quickly pivot the change in business process here, where we had to allow customers to come in only through appointments. And we also have to make sure that it was all the experience in our retail stores were all contactless, right? So things all the way from even making credit card payments, we had to make sure that the sales associate did not touch the customer's credit card, or the customer did not have to use the stylus to sign the terms and conditions on the sales associate's iPad, right? So how do you make that happen? And that's where I think having co-browse capabilities and having the customer use their device, essentially their device becomes a device they use to check in, use to view the terms and conditions. They accept the terms and conditions on their device. That flows right back into the sales associate's iPad. And same thing, they also use their device to enter their credit card, et cetera. We also took it to the level where if there are customers who want to make cash payments, they can do so by us sending a QR code, and they can use that QR code in our bill payment kiosks within our retail stores. So quite a lot of innovations that happened here, and we rolled out curbside pickup, in-store pickup, and we're seeing a good uptake in customers adopting these as well. So that's what, one example on the retail side. If the other example I'll give you is what we've been doing with our field technicians, right? So field technicians, the nature of their job is they have to be in customers' homes to install, bring their services up, troubleshoot problems, et cetera. But we know we had to make sure to take care of the safety and security of both our field techs and our customers.
Right.
We said, how about we provide tools to our field technicians, essentially remote visual assistance tools using augmented reality. That way, the technician goes to the customer's home, leaves the equipment outside the door. Now they step back, they don't have to go inside the customer's house, but now the customer uses their smartphone. The technician sends an SMS link. Customer clicks on that SMS link, uses the rear camera, points it to the equipment, and essentially what the technician is doing is annotating right there on the camera, so that way the customer can see and guiding them through the whole installation process or troubleshooting process. And those are things, again, which were very helpful when we talk about accelerating the digital transformation. So while we had rolled this out to our technicians, one can envision that, okay, when we come out of this pandemic, when the vaccines are there and the immunity has been developed, we will get back to a model of having technicians go in to our customers' home as well, following all the safety protocols and things like that, which we are already gradually starting to do now. But the same technology, we have moved it further upstream now. We said, why can't we take that, give the access to that same tool in our call centers? So when customers call in, the agents who are handling those calls can use the same capability and remotely troubleshoot these problems, provide a better experience to customers without necessarily having to do a truck roll. So it's a win-win. Customer gets instant gratification. Their problems are solved right away. At the same time, it's a win for the operations as well. We are saving the truck rolls, and truck rolls in our business is a pretty expensive proposition.
Right.
So those are some of the examples I can give you in terms of how we've been able to accelerate our digital transformation.
Yeah. We had another question coming in from the chat, and I think this transitions nicely. We've seen a couple news stories coming out in the last 2 weeks about 5G transformation and implementation being slowed down because of the pandemic. What are you doing with 5G right now? Have you had to slow down your plans for 5G at all?
Absolutely not. So if anything, we are accelerating our 5G plans. So during the pandemic as well, we have made it public. We went to the street and revised our capital guidance. Originally, we had communicated our capital guidance to be 18 billion US dollars in 2020. So we raised that by 500 million. So it's now 17.5 to 18.5. So we are well on our tracks. We've not skipped a beat when it comes to our 5G agenda. So our 5G strategy is essentially three-pronged, right? So we have 5G fixed wireless access. Think of this as the replacement for residential broadband. We have 5G mobility, right? So, and then we have 5G mobile edge compute, right? These are more for enterprise low latency use cases. Okay. Across all three fronts, we're making good progress. So end of last year, we had about 30 cities where we had rolled out 5G ultra wideband. And now, as I sit here, we have about 35 cities lit up, and we are on track to get to 60 cities by the end of this year with 5G ultra wideband. Same thing when it comes to our 5G fixed wireless access. By the end of this year, we'll have 10 markets where we will have the service offered, the replacement for home broadband using 5G fixed wireless access, and 10 markets for mobile edge compute as well, where you now can have compute sitting at the edge of the network, and it gives us an opportunity to have a lot of latency sensitive use cases to be running out of that environment. So long story short, we're not skipping a beat. If anything, we're doubling down.
Cool. So I thought we could shift our discussion a little bit to talk about you as a CIO, and how your role has changed considering the pandemic, and what you yourself are doing differently, and what you think is important right now, and then maybe how you think you're going to get your staff from today into maybe the next year. obviously things aren't going to be back to normal for a while. I think we've all come to realize that. So what's your role like, and how has it changed?
What's my role like? Like, if I look at, I think broadly, I would say where the role is more focused now on being a business leader first, a technology leader second.
Okay.
Right. So, if anything, what the pandemic has done is shine the spotlight on the technology organization being able to demonstrate the art of the possible, and working with all the leaders in the business, stakeholdering, collaborating with them. And now the business has been open to reconfiguring the operations, understanding what the technology can do to ultimately deliver the best experience for our customers. So to a certain extent, it's been this role reversal, if you will, right? So traditionally, the role of CIOs were more delivery-focused service providers. In my view, as we talk about the changing role of the CIO, it's more focused on how the CIOs become thought partners to the business. How do they demonstrate what is the art of the possible with technology and influence and stakeholder with their peers and figure out how to reimagine everything, whether it be reimagining products and services, reimagining operations, reimagining the way we work. So I think from that standpoint, that's been a huge change. To some extent, I would also say CIOs are playing the role of culture change leaders as well, because technology plays a big part in defining the culture of a company. So when you talk about introducing new ways to work, collaboration tools, etc., it is fundamentally changing, like in how work used to happen before, and that has become a catalyst as well. And we inside of Verizon as well, like in how we are, it's very encouraging to see how the digital dexterity of our employee base has increased several fold during this crisis as well.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like everybody's, I mean, me personally, it's all about changing and just being ready for anything. So Mark Newman, Chief Analyst of the TM Forum, has joined us. Hey, Mark. So
hey,
you have some questions for Shankar?
Hey,
so
Mark, how are you?
Nick's not going to be too happy with his broadband provider.
Well, I think it's not his broadband provider. I think it's his power's gone out.
Oh, is it? It's a power cut, is it?
It's due to, they had a big storm where he was, and he had a power cut.
He lives in the countryside, you see.
Yeah, but what we have going on here is exactly adaptability. Just think about it.
Right, exactly.
Right? So dealing with adversity on the fly, right? This is really like you can have all kinds of plans, business resiliency plans and everything.
I had to go and put a new shirt on.
End of the day, what trumps is human resilience, and we cannot undermine that, right? How very quickly we're able to adapt to things, and it's phenomenal. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, and you, Shankar. Shankar, interestingly, that point that Liz was just making about, and you were talking about, the CIO and the IT function become more of a business partner to other functions and reimagining different functions. I can totally get how, from a CIO perspective, that you want to do that, because that's making you a more important figure in the organization. But how welcoming are other functions you providing that capability? I mean, if we look traditionally at the IT function, it's not seen as being a business leading function. It's seen as being a more reactive function. So has that been challenging to establish yourself as someone that can bring in these new digital capabilities?
Yeah, that was a good question, Mark. But here's the thing though, right? So to be able to even have these discussions, the function, the leader has to have earned the credibility, the trust, and respect of his or her peers in the leadership team, right? And that comes over how we show up as technology leaders, how we lean in and figure out, what are the pressing business problems? That's the point I was making before. Be that business leader first. If we don't have an intimate understanding of what are the business challenges, what is it that we are trying to solve, and have that overarching goal, what I've found that works very well for us is when we have a clearly defined goal, Mark, right? So talk about collaborating with intent. That intent has to be crystal clear, right? So for instance, we have a program focused on how do we improve our customer experience with specific goals in terms of what we want our net promoter score to be. Now that becomes the rallying cry for everybody. So now technology comes to the table with, here is all the things we can do with the digital assets and these other experiences that we can provide, both in physical and in digital. We bring in the experience teams as well, who work with technology to say, okay, how do we shape the journey for the customer? We bring in marketing, we bring in operations. So now everybody, when you have this intent clear, everybody sheds their organization affiliations, if you will, and are all rallying behind that mission. And that's what internally in Verizon we call mission versus organization mindset. And when you have that, it helps break down all these cultural clashes, if you will, on you are this, I am this, etc. Right? So, and the way it used to be before. And that's one example on customer experience. Same thing we've been doing with the fraud. In that case, the technology team took the lead to say, listen, here is what we see. More and more digital adoption happens with our customer base. What we also see is bad actors trying to take advantage of the situation through social engineering and things like that, and essentially defraud our customers. So what should we do as a team to really rally behind this? It started off, I will tell you, internally within Verizon, 2-3 years back, we started this thing. It started off as a small technology-led program. Today, we still run this program. We have entire cross-section of the business who is with me on these bi-weekly check-ins that we have. And the progress we have been making there is tremendous, right? Our frauds has gone down 45% since we launched this. And when you have that, success breeds success. So people are like, listen, I don't care, which title, which organization, et cetera, park them outside the door and get together, have a mission, have a problem to go after, roll up your sleeves, dig in, and make things happen.
Yeah, and when it comes to your role in terms of innovation, and we talk about co-creation in a 5G world. We touched on this before in a chat that you and I had with Nick.
Yeah,
and that co-creation means putting software experts in front of your customers. And when we think of software expertise, traditionally it's tended to sit largely in the IT function.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Does that mean literally having people in the IT function, then putting them in customer-facing roles? And how does that work organizationally? Can they be part of your team and the enterprise team? Is it cross-functional teams? Is it fluid? Is it flexible? How does that work?
Absolutely. So I think this is a very good question. So let me address it. When you talk about the services we offer as communication service providers, if you take our consumer segment, the approach we have taken there for years has been build it and they will come, right? Yeah. So you build something, you productize this, and every customer has access to the same thing. You have to make sure you're able to scale it to tens, hundreds of millions of customers. Now, juxtapose that with what we have from an enterprise or a business customer segment, right? There, that, for instance, if you take what we're doing with 5G as well, we work with several marquee customers in different industry verticals. And as we all know, 5G is really going to be a big game changer when it comes to businesses, right? It is really what we call, it's going to usher in the fourth industrial revolution. But this is not one unlike consumer where you have a product, you then scale that same product across the board. We now have to get deeper to understand what are the problems that our enterprise customers are trying to solve. And if you are in a manufacturing industry, the problems you're trying to solve could be different than what a retail industry is trying to solve, could be different than what healthcare is trying to solve. So first and foremost, spending the time jointly, the product team, the technology team, the IT team, business and the commercial team, working with these customers to understand, if I'm manufacturing, I have a massive production floor, I have all these robots, I have a problem today. Whenever I have to reconfigure the factory floor, it takes days of downtime. So my productivity is lost. So now enter, okay, if I bring in mobile edge compute with 5G, what is the art of the possible? Okay, fine, we do those, we learn them, learn about what works and what doesn't work. Then very quickly we'll have to zoom out and say, okay, we got this working for this one customer. If I have to productize this and scale so we can monetize on this, what should the commercial model look like? What should be the required OSS, BSS, the whole system stack look like? And that's where we've been spending a lot of time, my team, along with our product team and our commercial teams, learning what these different kinds of problems are and taking those learnings and figuring out.
So can you just dive in a bit more in detail, understand? So you talked about making sure that technology, IT, product is all aligned. What does that mean? Does that mean creating a dedicated team? So I know, for example, that Corning's a company that you work with closely. And so, in terms of how you interface with Corning, is there a team of people taken from IT, taken from technology, taken from, and that's an agile team, I guess. Is that how they work?
Yes. It is a virtual team, really. Organizationally, it's not that we have, here is the thing though, right? These are agile teams, cross-functional, and they are given the autonomy to really go figure out, learn what is the problem here, come back, figure out now how do we really, is there some lessons that we can learn from this that we can scale out? Yeah. That way we now care for a use case across all of manufacturing, right? Yeah. So I'm not doing these one-offs but right now the way we are dealing with this, Mark, is more virtual teams, bringing experts from the different disciplines, having them work together as one squad, one tribe, whatever we want to call it, and they are focused on that particular problem. And we have that arrangement across different industry verticals to understand what are the unique challenges each industry is facing.
And I guess organizationally, that's challenging, isn't it? That means you need a more matrix approach towards your management.
Very much a matrixed approach to really figure out, and it is really taking agile to a whole new level there as well, right? So because it requires now, when we talk about folks having to develop that biz tech expertise, teams are, and the thing is, teams are loving it when the mission is very clear to say, here is what we need you to do. Now the purpose is there, right? Say, okay, good. Here's what my mission is clear. I'm going to spend the time I'm going to spend with Corning, understand everything, what they're trying to do, figure out what our technology can do. Okay, step back, zoom out, widen the aperture, figure out okay, how do we scale this across all of manufacturing?
Yeah, thanks. Liz, anything else coming in? Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one great question that kind of ties in nicely with this, more on the IT side. How should we prepare with respect to technology in terms of IT system modernization, public cloud migration, and managing Capex versus OpEx? I think this is a great question.
Well, this is a great question. So absolutely, when it comes to the remit for the CIOs as well, we have to optimize not only for efficiency, risk and compliance, which has been traditionally in our charter, but speed and innovation is absolutely critical as well. So to be able to do that, what that entails is it requires us to modernize our technology stack, right? If you think about what do I mean by that? These monolithic architectures that we had in place, we'll have to figure out how do we modernize them more to domain services, microservices based containers that can individually scale out, and that's where again it's infrastructure agnostic. So it should be able to run on your private cloud or public cloud as well. And I'll get to from a cloud standpoint as well very very soon. But reimagining the software architecture is going to be very very key for this, right? So if you think about the traditional setup in the telcos, let's take, for instance, a wireless business. There are multiple distribution channels. Each channel used to, has their own systems, like point of sale entry, or, the CRM platforms, etc. And then, is seldom do we find cases where all the systems of record are all in one place. But even if you have that, there is all this business logic that is sitting in these respective front ends. And what inhibits speed in our business is a few things. One is if I have to introduce a new pricing structure, commercial plan in the market, if I have a single billing system, single system of record, that's good. So you make the change one place, you're done. The other challenge we have is when you have this business logic that is sitting inside of all these different systems used in the different channels, that is another factor that adds to the time it takes to introduce change in the marketplace. So the approach we've been taking, like if you take up Verizon, for instance, the entire customer base is on single billing system. So that part we have cracked. Now the 115 million customers we have all in one billing system, one system of record. Up top, we have a systems of engagement, and this could be your digital platforms, whether it's the web, whether it is the mobile app, or the systems in our call center, systems in our indirect agents, in our retail stores. You get the idea. But what we're doing is we are hollowing out the business logic from all of those systems. Those truly become just the systems of engagement. We develop a customer experience platform right behind that. And then that is powered by systems of insights, so we can provide a hyper-personalized experience for customers. We have a single shopping cart, so that way you truly provide, rather than a multi-channel experience, which our customers were used to before, now they truly get an omni-channel experience where they can pause and resume the transaction, their journey, no matter which channel, distribution channel, they interface with us. And this is where, again, the work that we are doing in TM Forum plays a big part when you talk about the open digital framework, which is comprised of the open digital architecture and the open APIs, is a big help for the communication service providers who are on this journey to modernize the platform. This serves as a good blueprint of how we should really be thinking about componentizing these services and building them out in an elastic manner so they can scale no matter where. Getting to the public cloud question, though, the way we are approaching this is we absolutely are embracing public cloud as well, in addition to, so it's a hybrid cloud environment, private and public. And we have figured out which workloads are the right ones to move to public, which ones are the right ones to stay on-prem. And to the question on how do I trade Capex dollars for OpEx, yes, when you go to public cloud, you are going to be spending OpEx, but the key here is this. If you're trading $1 of Capex for $1 of OpEx, then you might as well not do anything in this space, because then we have really not accomplished anything. What we have to look for is, how do I really shrink? Yes, there will be OpEx, but for $1 of Capex, if I spend 50 cents, 60 cents of OpEx, and by the way, in this migration journey to the public cloud, don't just do a lift and shift, but instead modernize your platform so they become cloud native and can take advantage of the elasticity that you get in the public cloud, then you have a good formula. So what we do in Verizon is really the formula that I work with the team is it's agile plus DevSecOps plus cloud is really how we are looking at. And that formula is really what's going to help us from a speed, from an accelerating time to value perspective.
Shankar, could I just take you back to what you're talking about, the customer experience? We were talking before about the digital experience and the fact that you've had to be digital the last 3 to 4 months. And there's a question that came in about the balance between digital and physical. I mean, my thought here would be that it's inevitable that assuming that we emerge from lockdown and we go back to some sort of normal, we're going to see a rapid acceleration of the whole digitization of the customer experience. And from a Verizon perspective, from any telco perspective, you really want to be doing more digital, less physical, I guess, because partly because it's easier, I guess, to optimize experience, but also because it's more efficient for you.
Yeah. So clearly, the thing here, the way I would answer this, Mark, is we have to be mindful we don't swing the pendulum way too far. Right? Yeah. There's been this debate on does this mean that brick and mortar is dead? I don't subscribe to that philosophy. I don't think that's going to be the case. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% digital, nothing and brick and mortar. And at the same time, it doesn't have to be vice versa too. My view, yes, you can expect, maybe there is some consolidation of retail footprint, etc. But there is always a place for brick and mortar retail stores and a digital footprint, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that as a business, we are providing all the avenues possible to meet the customers where they are and what their preference is. Having said that, the next generation of this, in my view, will be more that hybrid online and offline experience, what I would call the phygital experience. It's physical plus digital, right? So for instance, when I'm on digital, how do we really make sure that at the right time, we have our experts, our agents, engage in that session with the customer who is engaging with us digitally to help them through to complete that transaction. It's much more than just popping up a chat box, chat box on your browser that just says, "How can I help you?" And it's got to be very thoughtful and knowing when to intervene and anticipating what the customer needs and where they are in that session, contextually engaging. So now there, it becomes a digital plus kind of an assisted experience. The customer is surprised and delighted because they feel like, okay, the company has got my back. They are helping me through this. Same way if I'm a customer in the brick and mortar store. We have finite number of associates in our store. If they are busy servicing other customers, how do we demonstrate as a company that we respect customers' time? So even if you as a customer show up in our stores and we can develop technology and tools to have you engage with another agent that is somewhere virtual, but can engage with you on a video conference, etc., and still you get an experience of touching and feeling the device, exploring what else is in the store, but you have this agent who is not physically present in that store, but helping you in that journey as well. Because so that way you're not having to wait several minutes for the agent in the store to come and see what is it that you want, etc. So all about making it frictionless, making it very convenient, and anticipating that customer demand and respecting their time more than anything. I think that is only going to be possible with this hybrid online and offline experience.
And when we think about aspirationally where telecom should be, is it right to look at banking and say, banking's probably moved ahead of telco in terms of digitization? Is that a reasonable starting point?
Yeah, I think that would be one that I would say it's closer to this in terms of why you go to. There's a lot of capabilities now you're able to do remotely, all the way from loan processing and everything. So I think I think that's a fair example to look at to say when do you have to go into a branch, and how do we get to that kind of an experience? I think that would be a fair comparison.
Shankar, we talked a little bit about relationship with other parts of the business. We talked about enterprise and co-creation. We've been talking for the last few years about the CIO CTO relationship, and I think that many organizations will now have a CTIO. So at the top, you'll see those two roles brought together, but underneath that, you might see two separate pillars or two separate silos. Now, we've been having some conversations about this. I mean, my sense is that there's no real blueprint that exists today in terms of how those organizations, precisely how and where they should come together. Is that fair, do you think? Do you think there's certain things that we can be clear about in terms of converging some of those capabilities and functions?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation, Mark. So I would say, so think about what's happening, right? Yes, within our business, in the communication service provider business, we have traditionally had the CTO function more focused on planning, building, and running the carrier network. And then we had the CIO focused on functions that is supporting the building the operation support systems to plan, build, and run the network, and also all the systems used by our frontline employees in sales, customer care, retail, field technicians, etc., managing the digital workplace, cybersecurity, operations of all our systems infrastructure, etc. That's how the functions had primarily been carved out. But I think, if you see what is happening in our business as well, more and more softwareization of the network is happening, right? With the ubiquitous adoption of software-defined networking, virtual network services, etc. What that is demonstrating is there is a need to converge these traditionally separate IT and network skills, if you will. And what has come in the way for a long time is this IT versus network culture, the skill sets, whether it's the funding priorities, et cetera. In my view, I believe a major inhibitor in why we have not been able to move beyond connectivity and really get into platforms and solutions is the historical isolation that we have had between the network and the IT functions, these two silos. And I truly believe there is an opportunity for us to demonstrate how do we show 1 + 1 is greater than 2, right? By bringing these two functions closer. And like going back to the point I made before, I'm a big believer in collaborating with intent. So how we can make this happen is to make sure we have a clear intent. And in fact, there is a body of work that we're doing in the TM Forum. We have a think tank that's spun up that is exploring exactly this topic. And one of the things that we're looking at is to say, rather than having a distinctly separate set of capabilities in network and IT, is there value in having a common technology layer that enables both these capabilities, both networking and IT capabilities, in a very seamless way on a continuum, right? Between network-centric to IT-centric capabilities. That way we can unlock the value of a fused IT and network organization. Because the way traditionally organizations are structured is you got the BSS, you have the OSS, then you have the EMSs, and then you have the network and the infrastructure down below. And pretty much there were multiple layers to get through to get to the network, which is what the key service and the capability that we are trying to expose. But as more and more of softwareization of the network happens, which is at the bottommost layer, is there a way to really tilt this and really more look at it horizontally to say, just like what we have been doing with the open digital framework within TM Forum, focused primarily in the BSS space, should we extend that similar concept to really also bring in the network capabilities and show them on a spectrum and think about the value that can unleash both internally and more as we start developing a partner ecosystem, which is going to be very critical when we think about services like 5G and et cetera. How do we make it easy for partners to do business with us? How do we support zero-touch partnering so they can come in, explore all the different kinds of capabilities exposed as APIs, and then come up with solutions jointly? So I think more work to do on this front, but you teed up on a very important topic, and I think we still have a lot more work to go. But
I guess what we're talking about, we need to have innovation in terms of, and customer centricity in terms of the network, so network-based 5G solutions and more software-based, application-based solutions. So working out what that divide is pretty challenging, and the conversations we've had suggest that we're all kind of finding our way into this, really feeling our way into it, and that I think is why you start this initiative with Nick, which I think
right. And I think that's where the idea why you see the CTIO roles bringing the CTOs and CIOs together, that was the reason. But now still for the most part they're being run as silos. But now this is an opportunity for us to define, okay, what should that North Star be? There is a reason why we put these two functions together, and then now let's all march towards that.
Yeah. Liz, anything else coming in?
Yeah, we've got quite a number of questions coming in. The first one talks a little bit about IT again and softwareization. The first person, I think it's Dan, has asked, as there's more to talk about with network functions moving to containers. As the network domain shifts towards IT-based workload, lifecycle management practices, do you expect any organizational impact? Is there expertise you will offer to your network peers?
Absolutely. And I think clearly, when we talk about look at what we did with virtualization, right? Virtualization was something that was adopted in the IT world before it's now more commonplace in the network. Same way, when we talk about DevOps practices, right? How do we really have the pipeline created for us to be able to do the whole continuous integration and continuous deployment? And more as we spin up these virtual network functions and have to orchestrate and them to provide that service, the expertise of having done DevOps in the IT world can be portable over to the network side as well. And the whole cloud management, the private cloud that we run within our network infrastructure for certain virtual network functions, et cetera. How do we do the governance of that? A lot of areas there is opportunities to cross-skill, cross-train, and those are things that we've already started. If anything, I would say those are the low-hanging fruits, if you will. There's a lot more that can be done.
Okay. There's another question that it's a little bit different, but I think it's still interesting to ask about. As a CIO, what are the main advantages you see in AI, not only in the company's portfolio, but also in internal processes?
Oh, absolutely. That's the we can go very deep on that one. But I'll try to keep it at a high level. See, with AI, if you really think about in the structure, the software architecture that I talked about with systems of engagement up top, customer experience platform, and then the systems of insight, and then systems of record down below. System of insight is really a new layer that we are introducing into this architecture. So what do we see with this, right? So if you think about the supply chain that we are trying to create here is in telecom, there's tons of data that gets generated, right? We got all kinds of data but I will tell you, not everything has been really put to good use. A lot of data exhaust happens. Whole idea here is how do we take that data, convert that to an insight, and then be able to act on that insight? That is really at a high level, the mission. Now, when we talk about how we use artificial intelligence in this, there are broadly three areas where AI can help, right? One is, how do you use AI to hyper-personalize an experience, right? That individualization, one-on-one customer experience. Other aspect is, how do we optimize the business operations? And the third is, how do you monetize the data, right? So those are the three, broad categories, if you will, on how we can use AI. But our focus primarily, if I take Verizon example, has been, while our Verizon Media Group is focused on mobile advertising and monetization opportunities, what we focus on in the Verizon core is on the other two aspects, using AI for personalization and using AI for optimizing our business processes. And AI is a whole spectrum. So let me give you one example of, as we build out our 5G network, there is a lot of work in terms of computer vision that we use, which is a discipline within AI, to really figure out how do I densify the network, where should I place these 5G transmitters, the objective there being minimal number of transmitters, maximum coverage. So we now need to be able to identify where is a pole, where is a bus stop, where is some other fixture, and if I were to place something there, what would be the kind of coverage? And these are classic use cases for computer vision, and that's how we've been building out our network, using computer vision for our 5G planning exercise. Same way with chatbots, things like that. Clearly, I think many are using that today, using natural language processing, et cetera. And then getting it all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is all around cognitive automation, right? Really figuring out how you can have AI also make a decision, not just find the insight, but also act on that insight itself without necessarily having human in the loop. But majority of the use cases are human plus AI use cases that we are focused on.
Okay. I've got one more question here that I think is interesting, and it's a little bit different than other folk that we've already talked about, so it's a good one to ask. Rajesh is asking about 5G MEC or mobile edge computing. What is the best IT approach, and how should the IT systems be prepared? So can you talk a little bit about 5G mobile edge computing?
Yeah, mobile edge computing. See here, mobile edge computing, if you think about today, what we have with public cloud, the latency that we have, applications going all the way to the public cloud and back, the end-to-end round trip, you're talking tens of milliseconds, 80 plus milliseconds, to go. What we're talking about here is if we have mobile edge compute, what 5G gives us is extremely low latency on the air interface. You're talking single-digit millisecond latencies. So getting that request in there and stopping and really doing the compute also right there at the edge of the network and providing the results back. So the use cases would be if you want to do high-speed video analytics, right? Computer vision, what kind of edge, compute capabilities will you need for that? And there are several things that, in fact, we are exploring with the industry verticals as well on what would those computer vision edge use cases be. And in fact, there is also different flavors of this, right? There could be a private MEC where an enterprise would choose to have a mobile edge compute running just inside their facility, or they could use a public MEC which would be running in our base stations, etc. So multiple use cases depending on what latency sensitive use cases that enterprises are trying to solve. Right. And in fact, in TM Forum, we've had multiple catalysts focused on the same thing.
Yep, that's true.
Shankar, we're just running out of time.
One more question in there, Mark.
You're talking about data and insights across the organization. I've just done a couple of big projects looking at data governance data models. How challenging has it been to have a sort of single overarching strategy for data that then feeds into the different silos, but also enabling that data moves across silos horizontally as well as vertically? Do you feel that you're getting there?
We are, I would not say we are there today. We are absolutely laying down the framework. Like you said, Mark, when we talk about AI, the raw material for this is data, right? We have to be careful. What does AI do at the end of the day? It's looking at historical data, drawing patterns, using those patterns to predict the future. So if it is garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. So the first area where we are focused on is data governance, to make sure that we have a single version of the truth, that is solid data governance framework. We have data lineage, everything cared for. The data quality is also managed before we train the models with that data. Otherwise, like I said, it's now going to be learning the noise from the signal, which is the last thing we want, right?
And in terms of that governance, do you feel that you know where you need to get to, or you're there already?
We have a blueprint. We are marching towards that. We've already started building the pipelines, but a lot more work to do. But that's the first area that we have been focused on, because up until then, I would characterize the way we have been doing the AI was more artisanal AI, right? In pockets we had going on. Yeah. What we are now focused on is how do we shift from artisanal AI to industrial AI to really make a factory. And for that to happen, you absolutely need, the table stakes is to have a solid, robust data governance practice.
Thanks, Shankar. So Liz, I'm guessing we're kind of out of time.
We are out of time on today's show. Yep.
We're just getting done. So Shankar, thanks so much. And Nick, sorry, Nick, I think you're still there somewhere, but we can't see you in person. So we think you're probably listening. So good luck with your power outage. But Shankar, thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot from you, so it's great. And thank you, Liz.
And Liz and Mark, I got to give a shout out to you as well. Just when we talk about adaptability and just jumping in, during this time, and you did a phenomenal job. It was a pleasure doing this with you. And Nick, I'll reach out to you later. Hope you're doing well.
Okay. Shankar, thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Mark,
thanks, Shankar.
Great question.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.